Tonight on Politicat, the campaign continues. Key points from Tuesday's Democratic debate.
And conflict in Syria, the latest situation with Trump, Turkey, and the Kurds.
Plus, less than a slam dunk, I'll dissect the conflict between the NBA and Hong Kong.
Those stories and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Justin Sweetwood.
And I'm Joey Safchik. Lots to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Maryland Congressman and civil rights advocate Elijah Cummings has died. According to a statement from his office, he passed away in Johns Hopkins Hospital early this morning following, quote, long-standing health challenges. He was 68. Cummings was known as a strong advocate for civil rights and used his position to highlight the needs of inner-city residents. Before his passing, he was serving as chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee and also played a key role in the Trump impeachment inquiry. Cummings' seat will remain vacant until a special election is held.
And new tonight, Bloomberg News reports that Energy Secretary Rick Perry has told the president he will be resigning from his position. This comes one day after the Wall Street Journal reported Secretary Perry was told by Trump to set up a meeting between Trump and the president of Ukraine. Also, Perry has requested to comply with congressional subpoenas about Ukraine's relationship with the Trump administration. He's been ordered to supply this information by tomorrow.
Also today, the Chicago Teachers Union officially went on strike. The union rejected the latest proposal from city government on Wednesday over base pay increases. Chicago public schools will be canceled for the duration of the strike. Meanwhile, organizations like the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab are working to provide childcare for CPS students.
The city of Fort Worth is dealing with another officer-involved shooting. Tatiana Jefferson, a 28-year-old working in pharmaceutical sales, was shot and killed inside her home early Saturday morning. The officer resigned from the police department on Monday. He was arrested and charged with murder. Local civic leaders are now calling for the federal government to investigate the police department. This shooting follows the conclusion of the Amber Geiger trial, in which a white Dallas officer was convicted of killing her black neighbor after mistaking his apartment for her own.
Democratic presidential hopefuls took the debate stage once again this Tuesday. NNN's Megan Leibowitz visited a debate watch party on campus and has the highlights.
On Tuesday, candidates went head-to-head for the fourth Democratic debate outside of Columbus, Ohio. But here in Evanston, ASG, College Democrats, and Political Union hosted a watch party right here in Harris Hall. Let's hear what they have to say.
Tonight especially, I think some people kind of popped up that maybe weren't as strong before.
12 candidates took to the stage in a debate co-hosted by CNN and the New York Times. The poll analysis website 538 reported that according to post-debate polling, Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg saw the largest jumps in net favorability.
Amy Klobuchar did a really good job tonight. Better than I'd seen her perform in others.
But for Political Union member Ellie Buckner, Elizabeth Warren's performance stood out.
I'm personally a fan of Elizabeth Warren, and I think she did an exceptional job tonight.
And Buckner isn't alone. According to the polling site Real Clear Politics, Elizabeth Warren is catching up to Joe Biden, and in some polls, she's pulled ahead.
What I've noticed on the debate stage is that there's a lot of big questions about what we want our country to look like. It's really important for us as students to really engage in different sides of the issues and think about, how we want to answer those questions.
The next debate will take place on November 20th. Megan Leibowitz, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Megan. Now to analyze more of what happened on Tuesday, I'd like to welcome in our panel. We have Zach Watson, co-director of WNUR News, and Dominic Bayer, vice president now of Northwestern College Republicans. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
So what stood out to each of you most from this debate? We've seen quite a few at this point. What was new this time around?
I must confess I didn't actually watch the debate.
Where are you here?
The debate. Sorry about that. I'm not an expert. I'm just a pundit. But what I was surprised about after reading about the debate highlights is how far left the Democrats are going. It seems like they're all just focusing on the primary. And I mean, coming up with proposals that are pretty extreme. I mean, stripping churches of deductions if they don't support same-sex marriage, Medicare for all, tax increases, mandatory gun buyback programs. I mean, those are all tailored, very narrowly tailored to extreme progressive activists. But those are broadly unpopular proposals that would definitely harm Democrats in a general election, especially with moderate, blue-collar voters in the Midwestern states that were responsible for Hillary Clinton's defeat. So it seems like they're trying to set themselves up to cater to the far left in the primaries and win the primary. But then they're doing that by alienating the moderate voters they need to win.
I'd be interested to see, especially with a lot of those policy proposals, how many of those stay for the general election and how many of those are just being focused on now in the primary. One thing I was surprised about, I caught the last half of it, was how much the other primary opponents really ganged up on Elizabeth Warren. It seemed like, especially on her healthcare plans with Medicare for All. She said that costs would go down for the middle class, but refused to answer the question about whether or not taxes would go up for the middle class. And it seemed like multiple candidates really attacked on that. I think that is because she has the new front-runner status, and candidates are seeing that as a new threat.
Now, it seems like there's always speculation before debates that one candidate might rise above the pack and gain support on the debate stage, like Kamala Harris when she dominated social media after her exchange about race with Joe Biden in the June debate. Do you think we saw that this week for any one candidate, Zach?
I really didn't. And I was looking at viewership stats afterwards, and it seemed like the two candidates that actually gained the most favorability were Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, who were definitely mid-pack leaders so far. So for that matter, this late into the cycle, I was very surprised at the fact that there didn't seem to be one standout candidate.
I'm curious, we didn't hear anything about climate change during that debate, and I saw a lot of uproar over that on social media. Do you think that there were just more timely news issues that took precedence, or was this something that they really missed?
I think there are a bunch of issues they're talking about. There's healthcare, there's guns, there's impeachment. There's a lot to talk about for Democrats, and they've already had a climate change town hall in the past, like a 7-hour climate change town hall. And they've talked about it in past debates. So I think the fact that they didn't talk about it in this debate doesn't mean they don't really care about the issues. There's so many issues to talk about in this contentious primary.
So Zach, I'm going to go back over to you now. Do you think this debate changed the trajectory of the race at all? You're talking about there's not a clear front runner, but did anyone fall behind? What's it looking like going forward?
In terms of people who fell behind, I think Tulsi Gabbard had a very, very rough night. I believe she used the term regime change war 6 times in one answer. And a lot of people accuse her of being an asset for a foreign country like Russia, and those accusations are unfounded, but she sure isn't making a good case for herself in terms of the way that she's speaking. She seemed to have a very negative impact on viewers last night.
So it seems that she's not doing too well, but Elizabeth Warren, she's starting to creep into the minds of many, not just as another candidate there, but on the same level as Joe Biden, as Bernie Sanders. Is she a real threat to win this nomination?
I do believe so. I do think at this point it is down to either Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, or Elizabeth Warren. I really can't see anyone coming from behind at this point. The first primaries are in February, which is less than 6 months away. At this point, I really don't see anyone coming from behind and catching up.
And if Elizabeth Warren does nab that nomination, what does this election look like? How does she hold up against Trump?
I think 2 issues that will definitely hurt her are her lying in the past about her ethnicity. So saying she's Native American when she has at most like an infinitesimal sum of Native American blood, lying for her own personal advancement, that just makes her look duplicitous. And then many of her plans are pretty extreme and would necessitate tax increases, which are very politically unpopular, especially among moderates. So that would definitely hurt her. Maybe if she finds a way of addressing those issues and presenting herself as, kind of a more moderate, wonkier Bernie Sanders, maybe she's able to appeal to those suburban voters and then the white working class voters in the Rust Belt, but I'm not seeing it at the moment.
What do you think?
Yeah, at this point, I think issues with her are going to be just narrowing down different policy proposals. She always says, I have a policy for that. I forget the exact phrase, but she has something like that.
A plan.
I have a plan for that, exactly. Thank you very much. But as we saw at this debate, she clearly refuses to outline certain plans, especially when it comes to Medicare for All. So she's going to have to narrow that down, even in this primary cycle, if she wants to win the general election.
Do you think she is the best hope for the Democratic Party to defeat President Trump? Because everyone's speaking about all that matters is defeating Trump, but who's going to be that one person for the Democratic Party to do that?
You know, I'm honestly not sure, because I do know that there are multiple Democratic candidates who, when polled against Donald Trump in the general, are having victory against him. I believe Warren is, Bernie Sanders is. I'm not sure about Joe Biden. I think he is narrowly at this point, and there's a few others. In terms of the best, I honestly think we should wait a couple more months until we say that.
And we'll have to leave it there. We'll be back with more after the break.
At Northwestern, we're wildcats in every way.
Cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Today, the U.S. and Turkey have reached an agreement for a 5-day ceasefire in Turkey's invasion of northern Syria. This Middle Eastern conflict has dominated news coverage this past week, including during the Democratic debate. So let's backtrack and talk about why an invasion 6,000 miles away deserves all this attention and the grave consequences it could have around the world. So earlier this month, President Trump announced U.S. troops will be pulling out of war-torn Syria. This drew widespread backlash from Democrats, Republicans, and U.S. allies in the region, including the Kurds. Critics said leaving the region will create an opening for Turkey to attack the Kurds and allow ISIS to regain strength.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and Senator Lindsey Graham proposed a bipartisan resolution to overturn Trump's decision to leave Syria. Now, the U.S. is asking Turkey to cease its offensive in northeast Syria and negotiate with the U.S. Just this morning, Vice President Pence met with Turkish President Recep Erdogan, and yesterday the White House confirmed the authenticity of a letter signed by President Trump telling the Turkish president, quote, "Don't be a tough guy, don't be a fool."
So this international issue has dominated news here in the U.S., like we said, because of the potential for a ripple effect that could very well reach the West. To unpack it all, we'd like to welcome back our panel. So what do we make of the fact that President Trump immediately punished Turkey with these sanctions instead of just reinstating troops in Syria or leaving the ones who are there?
I think he's really just trying to cover himself. I mean, because I'm sure he understands that his withdrawal of the troops was responsible for Turkey's aggression. But he doesn't want to admit that he was wrong about that decision. He wants to just trumpet and portray it as, oh yeah, I'm fulfilling my non-interventionist promise in the campaign about, oh, I'm not going to send troops to the Middle East. But then that caused Turkey to invade. And he wants to find a way of pushing back on Turkey on those grounds, but without admitting he was wrong. I mean, this has been just a constant throughout his years in politics, is he never admits he's wrong. And so even in this, you know, it's a crisis, a human rights crisis, and he needs to find a way to address it because of the political repercussions. But he's using sanctions instead of sending the troops back in because he doesn't want to admit he's wrong.
Is that the best way to address a humanitarian crisis?
No, I would say it'd be best if we had troops there. That's the only way of maintaining peacekeeping operations and preventing the massacre of the Kurds, because sooner or later Turkey is going to continue advancing in northern Syria. And if we don't have troops on the ground, sanctions aren't going to do anything. I mean, they might hurt Turkey's economy, but they're not going to stop Turkey's troops from advancing. Only troops could do that.
And not to say that this conversation is moot, but the Syrian Arab Army and Russian military has already moved into northern Syria, as have Turkey. So there is no more option to reinstate U.S. troops in a lot of these places. I do think in terms of foreign policy proposals by Trump, this action was probably the worst one in the history of his presidency. This is going to lead to possibly mass ethnic cleansing and an absolute humanitarian crisis at the hands of a leader who played Trump like a fiddle and knew exactly what Trump was going to do. And sure enough, Erdogan took advantage of that. He pushed troops in, and now we're going to have a major crisis that might have worldwide implications.
Dominic, do you think there are any benefits on any side of the spectrum from the U.S. for the U.S. limiting its involvement in Syria?
I mean, it's always beneficial to minimize our involvement abroad. I mean, sure, the costs in human lives and in military expenditures, I mean, you definitely have that. But the thing is about Syria is our cost was really minimal. We had a few hundred troops there. It really doesn't cost that much to place them there. It doesn't generate that much resentment. None of them were dying. None of them had died in quite a long while. So, I mean, the benefits of withdrawing them are pretty small. But the costs are all the human lives and all the chaos that's going to happen. And not only the Kurds being massacred, but also ISIS prisoners being freed, which will not only further destabilize the conflict in Syria, it could also come back to bite us in the form of terrorism.
So
Sorry, Joey, go ahead.
Thank you. Who are the real winners here? Let's talk about Russia, Iran.
I think definitely Turkey is clearly winning from this. It helps it address the Kurdish threat. Syria is winning out of it because it doesn't have to worry about U.S. involvement anymore. ISIS is clearly winning. It's benefiting from further chaos that allows it to expand its remaining areas in Syria. And Russia is benefiting because there's a vacuum that allows a vacuum created by a U.S. pullback that allows them to interfere in Syria.
And Zach, what message does the U.S. pulling out of Syria send to U.S. allies? Because a lot of people are thinking just the direct implication this has at home or abroad, but what about the countries that the United States is aligned with?
Well, if you agree with Trump's idea of America first, then I guess that's great. It's the fact that Trump and America only cares about itself, even if that includes, genuine human suffering. Trump clearly puts America's economic interests before any of that. It's a shame, to be honest.
Dominic, does putting America first have to consider foreign countries, or is it just about America? Does he have to consider other factors in play here?
I think the slogan is definitely something we should be pursuing. I mean, our foreign policy should be guided at doing what's best for our country and our citizens. But I think an important consideration in an America first foreign policy is looking at what's going on in other countries and how it's affecting the United States. And I think allowing Syria to become a haven for terrorism is not in our best national interest. I mean, maybe if like the proposal were, we should go into Syria, invade Syria, and effectuate regime change, then yeah, that would be against an America first foreign policy. But a small expenditure that has great benefits in combating terrorism and preventing human rights violations, that seems to be in line with an American first foreign policy.
What about the notion that America should be the moral police of the world, that they have the privilege to serve in that role?
I think that's an important thing because it helps project this image of the United States as the guarantor of worldwide peace and liberty and human rights. I think that's beneficial to us. But I think I kind of lean towards the more realist side at times at what's in our best interest. And I think the number one concern in Syria is addressing the threat from terrorism. And I think maintaining a few troops in there pays huge dividends.
And Zach, do you think this will affect Trump's re-election prospects at all?
I'm honestly not sure. It does seem like a lot of Republicans are lashing against this, especially in the House. It was over 300 votes for this resolution that you just spoke of, which included many, many House Republicans. In terms of voters, I'm not entirely sure. This is something that's happening 6,000 miles away, and it's hard for a lot of people to understand the ramifications of an event that's happening in a country that most of us have never been to, some of us have never even seen pictures of. So hopefully people do understand what's happening and at least can have compassion for those on the ground who are being affected. But at the end of the day, I'm a little pessimistic.
And Dominic, what about the impeachment inquiry? It seems like there's all these clouds surrounding the situation. Do you think the situation right now in Syria will affect that?
I think they're two very separate matters. I think this Syria withdrawal is going to generate negative political attention towards the president among both Democrats and Republicans. But it's really not going to sway anyone's votes when it comes to impeachment, because the Democrats are already very much committed to impeaching President Trump, while Republicans aren't convinced on the merits. And his policy regarding Syria isn't really going to change their minds on the legal, constitutional merits of impeachment.
Why was this such a big talking point at the debate?
I think because, I mean, there's definitely the human aspect of it. It's really a tragedy, considering all the lives that are going to be lost. And then it's just an easy political issue to bash President Trump. So it's something that can bring all Democrats together, except Tulsi Gabbard. But yeah, it's kind of a uniting force among the party, I'd say.
And we talk about the re-election prospects. I want to talk a little bit about the moderate voters. We don't know if it will sway the Republicans from the right to the left, even though many congressmen and congresswomen have been against Trump pulling troops out of Syria. But what impact will it have on the people who are undecided? Is it enough for them to go to the left instead of voting for Trump?
I don't think it's really going to have much of a political impact, or rather an electoral impact. I mean, the thing is, the elite really cares about foreign policy, and maybe people who are somewhat affected. But most voters, I mean, they don't really care about foreign policy when determining who they're going to vote for. So I really don't think it's going to help him or hurt him electorally.
What issue do you think will be at the forefront of the minds of moderate or undecided voters?
I guess I would maybe disagree a little bit in the fact that just the way he handled this situation, the way that Trump has been talking with foreign leaders is now broadcasted to the world. His letter to Erdogan was broadcast to the world, and he sounded like a 5-year-old child in that. It sounded like it sounded like he was in elementary school. So I do think with moderate voters, the more and more that they see of that, and the more that they realize that he truly has no idea what he's doing, I do think that is going to start to wear on him and probably affect his re-election.
But after all this time, do you think, after 3 years into his presidency, that is what tips them over the edge? Finally, now?
I hope so. I hope Trump being responsible for ethnic cleansing and possibly genocide, the blood on his hands, I would hope that at the end of the day, that this is enough for people to finally realize that he cannot be elected for another term.
Now, I want to look at the bigger picture here to wrap this up. How do we get more Americans, like you said, involved and to care about foreign policy, even when it's not a humanitarian crisis at hand?
Yeah, I don't think I have an easy solution to that. I think, you can try to inform people, but at the end of the day, people have a very limited attention span. And they're really concerned more about their day-to-day lives and how government affects their day-to-day lives. So that's why they're always going to care more about domestic issues. And sure, you can try to broadcast information and inform voters, but I just think it's something you can't really hope to have much of an impact on voters.
I think the idea that we need to push for everyone is that America First in 2019 does not work. Everything in the world, from the clothes that we're all wearing, I guarantee you, we are all wearing clothes that were made thousands and thousands of miles away. The global economy is vastly interconnected, and global affairs are vastly interconnected. Everything in your household has some relation with somewhere else in the world. So at this point, we need to think of, cooperation between countries as something that benefits humans as a species, and not just America first and putting one country first. It's 2019. We need to change that way of thinking.
All right, we're going to cut you off there. We'll be back after the break with some news you didn't know.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way. At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
We know the news is especially overwhelming as the 2020 election creeps closer, so we want to share a few stories that might have gotten lost in the shuffle this week. First, the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents is in murky waters. They're trying to establish free speech punishments for students who disrupt the free expressions of others. But follow me here. Experts say the board could actually be infringing on free speech rights by voting to enact these repercussions. There are concerns that punishments will instill a culture of fear on campuses and discourage students from speaking up altogether.
And the news you didn't know that hits a little too close to home. A gunman in Chicago killed 5 of his neighbors this past weekend. Chicago police say the perpetrator has, quote, anger management issues. It's another weekend with a notable death toll in the second city, with 28 shot, 7 fatally.
And you probably do know about the climate change protests taking the streets from Amsterdam to LA, Melbourne to Manila. Now, more than 400 scientists have endorsed civil disobedience as a tactic to force governments into taking action to prevent climate change. Hollywood legend Jane Fonda was arrested Friday during a climate protest. And these biologists, climate scientists, and more hope citizens will follow the leading lady's lead.
And now an in-depth look at a situation that's been in the news both at home and abroad. Earlier this month, Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey set off a firestorm not just in the NBA, but across the world in response to ongoing anti-government protests in Hong Kong. Morey tweeted an image with the words, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Even though he later deleted that tweet, China clapped back. The Chinese Basketball Association said it would halt all association it had with the Rockets. The NBA exhibition games in China later this month, canceled. A Chinese company's $1.5 billion streaming deal with the NBA, potentially at stake. China accounts for at least 10% of the NBA's current revenue, a figure that could double by 2030 because of basketball's wild popularity in China. Almost 500 million people watched some NBA programming there last season. The total U.S. population is 330 million. But here's where this all gets interesting. It's made some question whether the NBA is restricting free speech. The NBA called Morey's tweet regrettable and offensive, remarks that Commissioner Adam Silver later walked back. And at this point, the league will do whatever it can to prevent the situation from worsening. CNN anchor Christina McFarland was shut down trying to ask Rocket superstars James Harden and Russell Westbrook about the situation. Harden had previously apologized for Morey's tweet, saying that "we love China." And how about this? Last week, a fan was ejected from a Philadelphia 76ers preseason game for shouting and holding signs in support of Hong Kong. The 76ers management cited the fan was removed due to disruption. But what about LeBron James, the face of the league? Well, he said Morey, quote, wasn't educated and that we're not politicians. This is a man who endorsed Hillary Clinton and one that regularly attacks President Trump. It's also someone who lives and dies by the mantra, more than an athlete, until he feels his paycheck is at risk, a fear that has certainly been noticed among players, owners, and league employees.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
On Sunday, Poland's right-wing Law and Justice Party won a decisive victory in countrywide parliamentary elections. It won a second term as the ruling party with a campaign that combines social spending and nationalism, and has turned heads with what some call anti-press actions.
According to Reporters Without Borders, the Polish Law and Justice Party has pushed to nationalize independent media. Since the Law and Justice Party took office in 2015, Poland has fallen 40 slots in Reporters Without Borders' annual Press Freedom Index.
This recent election is in line with the wave of right-wing populism that's been sweeping Eastern Europe for the past 5 years. With these political shifts come new questions about the relationship between the press and the state, and who gets to decide who's in power. And that's all the time we have for tonight. We'll see you back here next week. For all of us here at Politicat, I'm Joey Safchik.
And I'm Justin Sweetwood. Thanks for watching. Good night.